Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the way in which America's Department of Justice is pursuing companies and people involved in taking money from the Russian state in return for presenting their propaganda in a way which makes it appear to be independent. And this has implications for us in the UK as well, not the least of which because the evidence that's been produced in America doesn't just talk about Russian interference in American politics, but British politics, as well as other countries in Europe as well. We know that the Russian state has interfered in our politics. We know it was heavily involved in promoting Brexit because they knew that leaving the EU would weaken both Britain and EU cohesion. Indeed, evidence provided in the US indictments shows that this was the intention. We also know that the Conservatives, who took a lot of money from Russian oligarchs close to Putin, told our own security services not to look for evidence of Russian interference in our politics. That's not hearsay. We had a parliamentary select committee say that. A group of MPs, which included Conservative MPs, in fact, this group was chaired by, at the time, a Conservative MP, said as much. That is officially fact. That much of what has gone wrong in the UK in recent years, with Brexit being chief amongst them, has been down to a coordinated effort by the Kremlin is beyond reasonable doubt. Yet aside from The Guardian and Byline Times, goes unreported to the British public, which of course means that very few people in the UK really know anything about it. Now it looks like the American government are taking the threat of Russian interference much more seriously, assuming I suppose the orange one can be defeated this autumn, which thankfully looks increasingly likely now. But what about the UK? We know that David Lammy, who at the time was Shadow Foreign Secretary before the election, made a big thing about the need to deal with the kleptocracy at work in Britain. What we're not getting is a lot of noisy details about what's going to be done when now that they're in government. And maybe this is because there are reasons to do it quietly, to avoid the need to loudly proclaim just how vulnerable we are. But it also means we don't really know what action, if any, is being taken right now or what action is intended in the future. Because I'll tell you what I find both remarkable and disconcerting at the same time. Russia is, by global standards, yeah, it's a major economy, sure. But by the standards of the countries it is infecting, no, it's not. It has a significantly smaller economy than the UK. It is smaller than France. It's smaller than Germany. It's way smaller than the United States. So Russia as a country is not as wealthy as many of the countries that it is infecting. Yet Putin can afford to just pay to have the populations of these countries conned into voting to harm their own country's interests and further Putin's interests. It's baffling. One of the latest cases is a social media content creation company in America who were paid reportedly about $10 million to push Putin's propaganda. Now, that is a tiny sum of money for a state in order to coerce a competitor state, in fact, the competitor state, into weakening itself. Now, obviously, the total amount of money spent both on Russian bots and paying useful idiots in Europe and North America will be much greater than £10 million. This is just to one group. But as part of a governmental budget for pushing its own interests abroad, the total amount spent is likely to be relatively peanuts. And it staggers me just how easily a country, Russia in this case, can easily buy political interference on this scale in much richer countries. It's mad. And we're seeing the results. We saw it in the UK in the form of first Brexit, and now the Conservatives jumping on the leaving the ECHR bandwagon. None of this is in the UK's interest. It's in Russia's interest. Putin has effectively transformed the Conservative Party into his puppet. And until they realise this, there's probably not much will be done about it. In fact, they might be even more vulnerable now because they'll be struggling for donations from the usual sources because they're out of power. They're without a clear plan for coming back to government. So the sort of people who donate in return for, a few public contracts, they're not likely to donate now because they're not going to get a good return on their investment. So, it'll be a case of, oh, don't worry, old chap. Sergei of Kensington will come along. Don't worry, old chap. I'll keep donating as long as you keep pushing these policies. which is reason enough for Labour to take the threat seriously. Too many governments in too many major Western countries have simply not taken this threat seriously. And Labour, really, if they don't do something before they start to lose the public in 10 years time, 15 years time, if there comes a point where they look likely to lose the next election and they haven't dealt with this, then they're just going to allow another basically Kremlin puppet back into government in this country. It's one of the most serious issues for any genuine patriots in Parliament. I know there are proposals from Labour to tighten up the rules on foreign money in our politics, which, by the way, is technically illegal anyway. But there are so many loopholes as to make the current rules pointless. Reform UK, for example, they are unable to demonstrate that they are not getting a lot of their funding in rubles, because there's no trail from source to party coffers for their donations. A lot of it comes from PayPal, you see. So it's impossible to audit. So we need to change the rules. But I also feel that we need to make the public aware of what's happening. We need major criminal investigations, because if the sort of investigations happening in America were happening in this country, I think it would be much bigger news nationally. Make them high profile. Let people see the real threat facing us, not the made up ones promoted by the same people taking money from Putin's disinformation machine. And it would then give Labour political cover needed for more robust action should it be needed. In fact, let's have a think about the way populists work. So they create a threat which doesn't actually exist. Or maybe it's a threat that does exist, but they lie about the cause of the threat. The threat is almost always foreign, of course. Hence why immigrants are the target for most forms of populism. Well, here is a case of identifying a foreign threat which is real. We know that it strongly supported Brexit. We know that it strongly supported the 2016 election of Trump. We know this from criminal investigations in the United States, from the massive fines issued to Facebook for their role in the Cambridge Analytica scandal to the investigations taking place right now. But apart from a bit of low-profile investigative journalism from people like Carol Cadwallader, people at Byline Times, we're not really having anything investigated in the UK. Now, it's early days in this Labour government. Perhaps the ball will start rolling soon. Maybe. I mean, what I said before the election, the thing I would like Yvette Cooper to do pretty much day one as Home Secretary is to say to MI5 and MI6, if you've been given any instructions not to look for Russian foreign interference in our politics, or indeed, if you've been told to cast a blind eye to any threats to our national security, can you consider that instruction rescinded? I want you to protect this country, right? And I want you to look for threats, including from Russia. So maybe that's already happened. Maybe there's just not a big fuss being made about it. But it does occur to me that we could, it's quite clear there are multiple governments very publicly, very explicitly standing up to Putin's global menace. And we'd do it better if we worked together. The UK and the USA at least, but also the European Union and individuals within the European Union affected like France and Germany. I might say Italy and the Netherlands as well, but maybe their current governments would be not quite so open about that right now. And I wonder why Labour are not making more of the way in which Russian interference is impacting our politics. After all, it would be another big stick to beat the Tories with, because that's what they're clearly doing at the moment. They're trying to say just what a mess the Tories have left of the country. Well, something like this is another way of doing that. And it's a genuine threat to not only the country's safety and prosperity, but to Labour's own project. Are they worried that making a big song and dance about incoming changes to, say, the way foreign money is scrutinised, maybe that puts off foreign investment just when they're chasing very hard after it? I don't know. What I do know is that American investigators are turning over more and more proof of the way in which Putin has been so easily able to influence public opinion in his favour. And yet we're not seeing any serious moves in the UK to tackle the issue. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.